Was it an angel or just a coincidence? I know what I believe, but you can call it what you want. My story takes place on the horrific day that no one can ever forget. September 11, 2001. I must start off by telling you what I was doing and where I was when it all happened. My workday started with my morning commute, where I would take the city bus about 10 minutes away, and then a 5-minute walk up the long street to the office building where I worked as a data entry clerk. I don't remember exactly what I did when I got there that morning, but I'm pretty sure it was going to the bathroom and starting coffee before going downstairs to my cubicle. Once at my desk, I remember getting myself organized and starting up my computer while saying good morning to everyone. Some of us in my department usually started work at 8 a.m. and would get there early, while others did not start until 8:30. I don't remember exactly what time it was when a coworker, we shall name her Charity for my retelling, came down the stairs giggling and saying she was listening to a morning show on a Spanish radio station where they were talking about airplane parts falling from the sky. Charity, who thought they were joking at the time, since that's what that show usually did, laughed about it and started telling us about the radio show and things they were saying, until her supervisor, who sat in front of my cubicle, turned on the little radio she kept on her desk. It was when Charity asked her to put that station on to continue listening that we found out that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. We all sort of gasped, and she turned the volume up so we can all listen to the news. Then a few minutes later, the guy I was dating at the time, who lived in New Jersey, right across the river, called me at work and said one of the towers of the World Trade Center was on fire, and he could see it from his apartment. I immediately hung up and called home, where I lived with my parents, grandmother, brother, and aunts. My mom answered, and after telling her what I knew, she immediately screamed out to my grandmother to put the TV on. I could hear the gasps. Then, silence. Then, crying from my mom, who came back on the line, saying there is a huge hole in the tower and it's on fire. She repeated to me what she had heard the reporter saying. It was confirmation that a plane did in fact hit the tower. We began discussing how a plane could have missed those tall, giant towers in the middle of Manhattan. The next moment, I remember, after hanging up, is standing around the little radio with a small group of us from the same department. Then, just as I was going to go back to my desk to work, the radio host, with fear and sadness in his voice, announced that a second plane had hit the second tower. We all had our hands over our mouths, and no one spoke for a few seconds to almost a moment. At that moment, our shock wore off, and almost simultaneously, about 3 of us said, "We're being attacked." I was back on the phone with my mom right after that, and we were crying. We were panicked, but trying to stay calm at the same time. She was telling me that my aunt was already on her way to pick up my cousin, who went to school in Manhattan, and my older brother, who was leaving to go find his pregnant wife, who worked very close to the World Trade Center. There was a lot going on at the same time, and I started to feel very anxious. I didn't know whether to get back to work or leave. How could anyone stay in the office after that? The word started going around that the president of our company was allowing those who have children to leave so they can go pick up their kids at school. It was announced on the news that children will not be dismissed unless a parent or guardian signs them out, because of course the kids are safer in the school building. So all the moms and dads left the office to go pick up their kids and be with them and their families. Children were not being dismissed unless they were signed out. All public transportation was asked to stop. No air traffic. And everything just suddenly came to a halt. New York City was on high alert. My fear and my anxiety were very high, as was everyone else's. But I couldn't sit there and wait for an entire workday to be with my family, knowing that we could be in the middle of a war. and I may not get to see my family again? The thought just sickened me, and so I decided to walk out. I told my coworkers I couldn't stay. I grabbed my things, stopped at the receptionist's desk, and told her to please let the managers know that I had to leave. I needed to be with my family. I told her to be safe, and I walked out the door. It was the moment I made it outside and turned to walk down the street that I realized how I originally got to the office. Public transportation. I didn't have a car. I didn't even drive. How was I supposed to get home? It was normally about 25 minutes by public transportation, 20 minutes by car, and if I walked, it would take me about an hour and 20 minutes. Of course, I hadn't thought it through, but I was not going back. I was going to walk until I made it to my family. I walked one full New York City street when I got to the corner to cross a 4-lane street. And as I waited for the traffic sign to tell me when it was safe to cross, a young boy appeared next to me. He was a brown-skinned boy who looked about 10 years old, wearing his backpack. He looked up at me and told me, "It's going to be okay." I turned and looked down at him. I hadn't realized I was crying and emotional until he said that. He must have noticed. We then crossed a large street and made it to the other side. That's when I looked down, and I noticed the boy was alone. But the schools were on lockdown unless a parent signed you out. So I asked him where his parents were. He didn't quite answer the question but told me that he was going to meet up with his uncle. But he seemed to be more interested in comforting me with his words than anything else. He was telling me things like, "It's going to be okay," and "I'm glad you're going home to your family." What a little cutie he was. I found myself venting to this child. At the next traffic light, I turned to check for oncoming cars on this smaller 2-lane street. And when I turned back the other way, the boy was gone. I looked all around me and I didn't see him anywhere. Did he go into a store? Did he run off? Did his uncle pick him up in a car and I missed him getting in? He was nowhere to be seen. But I kept on walking and praying that he got home safe. After walking for about 20 minutes, I was feeling tired, emotional, and full of anxiety. That's when I heard a loud horn. Living in New York City, I usually ignored car horns because it was a common thing all day, every day. However, when I heard the horn a second time, I decided to look, and I saw the city bus driving almost at the pace I was walking. I was so confused because I wasn't near a bus stop, and the news had said no public transportation. I continued to walk, and the horn sounded again, but this time, the door of the bus opened, and the female bus driver called out to me. She said, "Need a bus?" She stopped the bus completely, and since this time it was at a bus stop, I felt it was safe to walk up to the bus. As I got closer, she said in a soft, caring voice, "Come on, get on." So I did. And when I pulled out my Metro card, she told me to put it away. The ride was free. As I walked to sit down, I realized there were no other people on the bus. She told me that they came on the radio and let her know she can go back in service. Yet she wasn't stopping at any other bus stops. Instead, she asked me what my stop was. I gave her my stop name, and when we get there, she asked me if the stop leaves me close to home. I told her the name of the street that would lead me closer to home, and she said, "Don't worry, I'll leave you closer." I was so grateful. I thanked her many, many times. She left me right at the corner of my home. I only had a block and a half to get home. I made it home safely where my family were all sitting, watching the news, waiting on news of other family members. I hugged everyone and we sat there together, crying and praying. Everyone in my family made it home safe. Every single one. It almost makes me feel guilty because so many of my friends, co-workers, and other extended family members lost people close to them, whether they had passed away or still missing. When I told my story of the little boy and my trek back home and the bus stopping for me, they all had the same response. That little boy, he was your angel.